Phyllis Turchin Rosinski Aronson, and my birthday is October 6th, 1935. And I was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and grew up until I was 18 years old in the city of Sioux Falls. My grandparents lived in Sioux City, my father's family, and my mother's family, Omaha, Nebraska. And I'll start with my mother's family first. Her grandmother was Fanny Hoberman, and she married Abraham Gleimer. And they had 3 children, Leah, Joseph, and Bertha. And Bertha was my mother's mother. And there were 2 other children, Leah and Joseph. And from all that we know, they were born in Poland, and that all 3 children were born in Poland. And Bertha married Abraham Zabit, and they came to the United States, and they brought their first child, who was Lottie, and she was very small. When she grew to full age, she was only like about 4'10", 4'11", and when they brought her in steerage, and they brought her in a shoebox. That's how little she was. And all of these stories I've heard through the ages, and from everything that we know, in the Warsaw Ghetto, Leah and Joseph perished, whether they went to a concentration camp or what, we don't know. We just didn't hear anything from then on about all of them. My grandmother, when she married Abraham Zabit, he was the son of Gertrude and Isaac Zabit. And he was born in 1890, and so was Bertha, and he only lived till 1926. He was 37 years old, and they had the 3 children, Lottie, Jaime, and my mother, Hazel. And before penicillin, he died of an abscess tooth. And he had a grocery store with all kinds of odds and ends that he sold. And my grandmother, her whole life, she was a feisty, 5-foot-tall woman. She would always say that the ring of the cash register was music to her ears. And she was very, very smart and very aggressive and very, she raised the family. She married a couple more times. Her last marriage was to Sam Ruderman, and he was a plasterer. And she lived in Omaha her whole life on Lincoln Boulevard, 32nd and Lincoln Boulevard. My mother went to Tech High School, and Lottie lived here her whole life. She had a son, Alan Bograd, and Jaime had 2 boys, and he lived in Rock Island most of his life, and we've sort of really lost touch with his boys. But my father went to Central High School in Sioux City. He was one of 5 children, and the oldest one was Bess, who married Mark Sable. They were divorced later, and they had 2 children, Jean and Bob Sable. And the next one was Al Turchin, and he had 1 child, Dick Turchin, and Al and Bess were born in Russia. They came from Russia in an area called Minsk, Alberta, and all of my grandparents on both sides, my mother's and my father's, emigrated into Ellis Island. And as far as I can figure out, the Turchins came here in 1908, and my grandmother, her name was Kantrovich. She was Mayor and Gruna Kantrovich were her parents, and they had 4 sons, Abe, Michael, Harry, and Joe, and 2 daughters, Anna and Fanny. And Anna was my grandmother, and she married Morris Turchin in Russia. And they came here, like I said, in about 1908. My grandfather had a brother that was a barber in Brooklyn, and I think another one, or he had a son who was a teacher in New York City. But there were 5 children in all in the family besides Bess and Al. My dad was born in this country, and my mother as well, and her brother Jaime. But my dad and Abe Turchin and Lillian Turchin were younger than my dad, and they were born in this country too. And my dad was a high school, he was in sports of all kinds, and he was in basketball, he was in track, he did everything. And he had all kinds of trophies that my mother, I gave her so much trouble and grief later on, because that's what we played with in our sandboxes, and we have none of the trophies today. But my father and mother married in 1932. My father had gone to Omaha for an AZA meeting of some kind, and he met my mother. And when they got married, they lived in Sioux City from 32 probably till the beginning of 1935. And my father worked for a fruit company called Galinsky Brothers. And he was offered $50 more a week, so he took the job in Sioux Falls, and he sold fruit east and west of Sioux Falls. And my 2 siblings, I have a sister, Virginia Becker, and my brother, Mike Turchin, and my dad used to always take us on the road separately. We knew his customers. There was one that we used to save our teeth for, and he had jars of people's teeth that he put with charms in there too, but that was always a big deal. And my dad was a sweetheart. He just didn't have a mean bone in his body. I remember one spanking, and that was for trying to pull my sister out of her crib by her arm. But they had a wonderful marriage, and growing up in Sioux Falls was a wonderful experience. And for all Jewish holidays, we would go to my grandparents in Sioux City. And the cousins would sleep on the front screened-in porch, and we used to all be around a big table. My grandfather, Morris Turchin, was a junk man for many years. And then, I don't know when he quit doing that, but he used to sell all kinds of things out of his truck, and he was very religious. If the rabbi was out of town, he could do the services at the synagogue. And so he was at one end praying on the Jewish holidays and going through all the prayer books, and at the other end, my uncles and Dick and Bob, my cousins, would always be telling jokes, and it was just fun. And to this day, I'm very close with my cousins. Jean had a boy and a girl, Barb and Jeff, and we see them. And of course, I'm very close with Bob Sable and also Dick Turchin. And we talk a few times, every couple weeks, and Bob even more, at least once a week. And it's just nice, all that formed when we were growing up. And my other grandmother lived in Omaha, and we used to call them Omaha Grandma and Sioux City Grandma. And we spent a lot of time coming to Omaha too, and we would get hot tamales. She lived down by the Stores Brewery somewhere. That's where my aunt lived. And we used to get tamales from peddlers on the road, and Reed's ice cream, and we just would have a very good time every time we came here. Well, I went to Washington High School in Sioux Falls, And I think there were 5 Jewish boys my age or a little older to date, and I was taller than 3 of them at 5'6". And to this day, I'm still friendly with a boy that was a year or 2 younger who's an attorney in New York by the name of William Zabel. And we keep in contact, and I just have very, very fond memories of Sioux Falls and growing up there. Most of my friends were non-Jewish, so I'm as comfortable in the Jewish world as I am in the non-Jewish world. I didn't really know what cashmere sweaters were until I went to the University of Nebraska and all the Omaha girls had them. But I went to the University of Nebraska, and my first year there, I met Saul Rosinski, and we married in 1955, and we had 2 girls, Susan and Nancy, and Susan has 2 boys, Josh and Adam, and Nancy has 2 girls, Emma and Sarah, and they live in Palm Beach, Florida, and Nancy's husband is Stephen Richter, and Sue is divorced at this time, but going to school for her MBA at the University of Kentucky. And we get together often, we're very close, and Saul died in 1977, and in 1980 I married Harvey Aronson, and I've been married to him at this point for 28 and a half years, and I was living in Portland, Oregon with Saul when he passed away. And Susan was at Stanford at the time, and Nancy was going to an Oregon school, and then she transferred to Arizona, and so when I came back to Omaha, I still had many, many friends, and the girls and I are very, very close with the Rosinskis, and they're close with my sister's family too. My sister has 2 daughters, Lisa and Jody, and Jody's married to Gino Vinci and has 2 children, Stephen and Mia, and Lisa has a daughter, Ashley. So whenever my girls come in, it's a lot of relatives and lots of cousins, and my girls are very close with the Rosinski cousins, and everybody makes an effort to come to anything, if it's a bar mitzvah or whatever, and the girls love their Uncle Jerry and their Uncle Richard, and Doris and Charlie as well, and Janice was really special.
Phyllis, let's go back, and I want you to tell me about your father.
Okay.
The kind of person he was,
Okay.
and
Okay.
your experiences growing up.
Okay. My father was very easygoing, very sweet. He, he called himself a fruit peddler, and he would do anything for anybody. And there was, in one of the small towns he went to, there was a priest and of a church there, and he knew he could count on my dad always to sell raffle tickets for his church every year. And my dad would put up dill pickles every year, and he would give them out, and he would it was a big deal. He would make them in the basement, and the major question that he would ask my mother always, do the girls have their periods? Because he thought that would spoil his pickles if we were in the same room while he made his pickles. And he just was such a fine person, and he would drive us on trips. We would go, we went to the Black Hills a few times with, the 3 of us kids arguing for a window. And my mother was more of the disciplinarian. We were more afraid if we did something wrong that she would come after us, but we always knew my dad was a patsy. And he loved a good joke. He always helped people, and in the war, he was drafted, And he got to Okinawa the day the war ended, and I still have a bracelet and a dog tag he made for me while he was in the Army that I treasure. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful man. And my mother and he, they were a beautiful couple, and had many friends. And they retired to Arizona until later years, and they became ill, and they moved to Omaha, and just lived a few blocks from me, and ended up going to. Both of them ended up in the Blumkin home. But my father, everybody liked him. He was in the middle child, but he was, I still, to this day, have to have a football game going on in the background, because growing up, even if I'm reading a book, if there's a football game on, it's background music for me, because I grew up with him watching football, basketball, and the smell of Bengay always on his knees, or aching from rheumatism from when he was in sports.
And how about your mother? What kind of a housewife was she?
My mother and father invested in a bar, and my dad still had his route with Galinsky Brothers, but he would work at the bar at night. My mother would go down there and help him. My mother worked, when I was a baby, they hired this woman who was not married. I think she was from a farm somewhere in South Dakota, and her name was Ruth. And today she is in her 90s, I believe, and we still keep in contact. I was her baby, and every year we talk a few times. We talk every year around Christmas time. She had saved a lock of my hair, and she gave that to me once. So it's nice, to keep in contact with all these people. And we loved living in Portland, all of us. And when Saul died, I thought I'd always be out there, but ended up back here, and I love Omaha. And my mother worked in a women's dress shop. My mother was very smart, and she, they bought stocks for 50 cents, $2, as in the early years. And later on, they watched every penny. They went through the Depression, and my mother and father, we never had to help them in the Blumkin home. They had their own money, and it was wonderful to see what they did with their lives, how they came out of the Depression, and their great love for each other. It was forever. And my mother was a beautiful, beautiful woman. Her hair turned white when she was in her early 30s, and she just let it stay white. And she worked at the time. My dad was in the service part of the time, and then my brother was born right before. And we would go visit my father at the camps that he was in, and it was a big deal. We got to eat in the mess halls, and he had a captain by the name of Captain Marzio, and it was just fun for all of us. Not fun for my parents, but fun for us. But all I can think about for my parents, for both of them, is what a wonderful, wonderful childhood that we had. And they did everything they could for us, for what they had. And the other part of the family, it's very, very warm, and still with us today.
How was mealtime at home when all of you sat down together, or did you?
We always sat down at mealtime. My dad would be home by 5 or 6 o'clock every day, even if he was out on the road. And every Sunday, my mother was just a so-so cook. She would bake, and she would bake cinnamon rolls and things like that. But every Sunday she would make chow mein, and all kinds of cans would be dumped into a big pot. And that was always Sunday dinner. And my mother was very creative. She would, she covered the walls with some type of shelf paper and in the kitchen, and she, if there was anything that went wrong, my mother fixed it. She could fix a plug or anything with a lamp cord. My dad couldn't do anything. They just shovel snow, I think. And my brother married a girl by the name of Lesta, and he met her at the University of Vermilion. And my brother was not a great student. He was okay. And when my dad took him there, he said, Mike, if this doesn't work out, there's always the Army. And my brother is the only one with a PhD today of our family. He taught at a number of universities, University of South Dakota and in Texas, and he's a sweetheart, just like my dad.
Are you in touch with your sister and brother?
Yes. My sister lives here, and we talk, I would say, almost every day. And my brother, in fact, called this morning. He calls to let us know what he's doing, and I went to visit him this fall with a couple that I know from here. We had a great time visiting them. And he doesn't have any children, and he just was so much fun. He lives in the Black Hills, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful person.
What memories do you have of going to elementary school before you got into high school?
Okay, I remember I went to Emerson School, and the kindergarten room, as I recall, was huge. And I went back a number of years ago, and of course it looked very small. But it was like a block and a half, maybe 2 blocks from my house. And I went through to 8th grade there, and my dad, the high school, Washington High School, was quite a ways away. My dad would take us every morning, and I remember the snow. There were drifts, up in the doors, to the middle of the doors, and cold, and I still like change of season today. It doesn't bother me at all, the cold. My girls, it's a little different.
Do you remember the winters in South Dakota?
Yes, yeah, that's where we had lots of snow, lots of wind, and grade school, I still remember some of the children I went to school with, but I've lost touch. It's been too many years now.
Did you finish the university?
No, I went for 2 years, and at that time they had 2-year certificates for teaching. There was a shortage of teachers. So when I married Saul, I was a school teacher, and I taught school at Oakdale School, which is on Center Street. And I did that for about 2-3 years, and then I headed the nursery school program at the Temple, and I did that for years. And then when we moved to Portland, I didn't know the people and didn't have the opportunity to teach in a nursery school. They didn't have one at the Temple there, so I sold real estate. I've always worked. I've always liked to be busy and to work. And when I married Harvey, I came back, and we were very friendly with the Friedmans at Borsheim's, and I would work a couple days a week there and help them out over Christmas. And so that was fun too. So I've always been an active, busy person. And Harvey and I spent, this is the 21st year we've owned a condominium in Florida, which is 3 blocks from Nancy and Stephan and the girls. And so that's always fun too. And Sue comes in to visit, and I have lots of friends in Florida too now that are from different places. When I graduated from Washington High School in Sioux Falls, my parents wanted me to marry someone Jewish, and so they sent me to the University of Nebraska. And I went for Rush Week at the SDT house, and I met Janice, who later married Jerry Brzezinski. Her name was Janice Ringo. And she had told Saul about me, and to be sure and come and look me up. I don't know how interested Saul was in Jewish girls at that point, but I met him within the first 3 weeks of being at the university, and I went just with him after the 3 weeks, and we got married 2 years later. And Saul was very funny. He was very creative. He didn't like school. He first he went into the bar business with Jerry and Rich, basically Jerry, and they ran the Red Lion, which was a cocktail lounge on 38th and Farnham. And Saul started a magazine, This Week in Omaha, and he did that for a while, and we had no money. I mean, it was really, really tough. Those years were tough, but looking back, they were some of the best years that we could ever remember. We had the girls, and they were just wonderful. And then he worked at Bozell and Jacobs, and he had a number of accounts, like 40-some accounts that he would service, and that was where his interests were. And then pretty soon Don Burden hired him away, and he worked for KOIL radio. And at first he was just working for the star stations, and he was doing bridal fair, and he was doing all of their work for all 3 stations. Don had a station in Indianapolis called Wife, and another one in Portland, Oregon called Kissin, K-I-S-N. And so we would, Saul and another man by the name of Steve Brown worked together quite a bit, and they brought concerts into Omaha. So all the rock concerts and everything my girls would go to. And I remember once we went to Rosenblatt Stadium to a game, and with the girls, and there were fireworks afterward, and I remember the girls were really little, and on the way home they said, "Dad, please, please don't ever leave Coil Radio." They loved it, and they were very popular at school because of that. And then Saul had the opportunity to go to Kissin Radio and run that. He ran Coil Radio for a number of years, and it did really, really well, and Don wanted Saul to run Kissin Radio. So we moved out there, and it was very difficult for me. I think I cried all the way out there. I didn't want to move. And Janice and I were like sisters, and she said, "I know you, after a year you won't want to come back." And after a year, I was settled, and I was busy there. I started to sell real estate, and I still have friends from there that I still keep in contact with, and so do my girls. And we were there 4.5 years when Saul died suddenly of a heart attack one night. And the girls were 16 and 17 years old, and it was a very hard time in our lives. And 2.5 years later, I married Harvey, and we had a wonderful life. We traveled many places, and I enjoyed the people at the Kiewit Company, and we just had a good time. And we've been pretty much all over the world. We've been to China. We just went everywhere, and we really had a wonderful time. And looking back on my life, I really want my children to know that I'm really happy. I'm happy with my life. I'm happy with what I've done. My children and grandchildren make me very proud. I love the Rosinski family, starting with Ruthie and Phil and Karen and Steve, that I'm very close to. In fact, Karen and I have dinner every Tuesday night at the Mediterranean Bistro. And Richard and his 3 children, Barb and Sam and David, I'm very close with, Marty, Barb's husband, and Karen Rosinski as well, and also Jerry's family, Janie and Bobby and Neil and Sarah, and I treasure that family. And when I look back at the times when I first married Saul, we would have dinners at his mother's every Friday night. And she was so crazy about everyone, and she would make everybody's favorite. And I remember the Jell-O. The Jell-O was always this high. And she couldn't cook, but she would make lamb chops for this one, and she would make chicken soup for everybody. And I remember Saul telling me that she was such a bad cook that when he was growing up, the first time he ate out and he tasted good food, he stayed away from home. He didn't eat home very often. But it's just a wonderful, wonderful family. We had lots of laughs, and Phil was a lot of fun too, and Ruthie, and Phil and Saul were really very, very close friends, and it's just been a wonderful life. I've grown from the sad things, but my glass has always been half full.
Let's go back, and when did Saul first propose to you?
I remember Saul and I talked about getting married, and I remember one day or one evening he had the ring in the glove compartment. And he kept telling me, open the glove compartment. And I was arguing with him, why? I don't want to open the glove compartment. And there he had a ring for me, and it was a beautiful marquee. And he was 20, and I was 19, almost 20. I turned 20 in October, he turned 21 in November. And it's just amazing to look back now at how young we were, but it was sort of the sign of the times. And people today have their children later, and it's all different.
Where did you get married then?
Where we got married in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and our friends came to Sioux Falls, and my dad and mom had the reception, and it was a beautiful, beautiful wedding, and the cousins were all there, my grandparents were there, and as I look back on everything, it really, really was a happy life. Everything that I am today and everything that I've lived through has made me a stronger person, a more caring person as far as my family is concerned, and the family and the people that I care about are the most important to me.
Who were the attendants at the wedding?
Okay, the attendants at the wedding, Saul, I'm trying to remember who he had. He had Jerry and Rich and Phil, and I had my sister and Ruthie and Janice, and I had another friend from Sioux City, Iowa. Her name was Kay Crigston. Her father was Dr. Joe Crigston, and we were very close growing up. And but my sister was the maid of honor.
And where did you go on your honeymoon?
We went to Las Vegas, and I'm not a gambler, and I never have been. And Ruthie and Saul always loved to gamble. I don't think I saw a lot of Saul once we got to Vegas. But and then we drove there, and then later on we went again with a cousin of Saul's by the name of Howard Sells, who now lives in Los Angeles, and he liked to gamble too. And I will always remember he had run out of money, and he had a silver dollar on each side of a lighter, and he took it. He pried them off, and he gambled with those. But we had lots of fun times, and I still look at all the pictures of the birthday parties that the kids had here, and we had lots of family birthday parties with all the Rosinski cousins and my sister's family. And it's always a big deal when my girls come in today with their children, with their husbands. There's a Rosinski night, and then there's a Turchin night, because it's just so many people, and we divide it up into two groups. But it's always fun, and it's always warm, and it's always what matters. I also have a lot of bonuses and extra pluses. And Karen and Gary and their 3 children, Jennifer and Mark and Rachel, are big, big pluses. And also all of the Rosinski, and I mentioned the Becker grandchildren, Stephen and Mia and Ashley, but Sydney and Samantha and Ben and Jacob and Hannah and Helen are all, I'm the great aunt to those. Not calling myself the great aunt, but it's the great aunt. And something started when Mike Rosinski was little, and he couldn't say Aunt Phyllis, and so he used to call me Aunt Fuffa. So today, to the whole Rosinski family, I'm Aunt Fuffa. And to my grandchildren, all my grandchildren, I'm Graham Cracker. And I started out as Grandma, and Sarah changed it to Grammy, and Emma, a number of years ago, changed it to Graham Cracker. So on that side of the family, all of Sarah and Emma's friends, and Nancy and Stefan's friends, and Josh and Adam, I'm Graham Cracker. And at one time, Josh was sick, and he was in the hospital. He was very young, maybe 3 or so, and Sue took him up to a vending machine and was asking him what he wanted. And she said, "Do you want candy? Do you want graham crackers?" And he turned to her and he said, "Graham cracker's a person, it's not something to eat." So I love my name, and I answer to it always. And in Palm Beach, I'm known as Graham Cracker. And when the kids come here, Sarah's now 18, and Emma's 16, and I'm still. I want to end this interview now and tell Susan, Josh, and Adam, and Nancy and Stefan and Sarah and Emma how much I love you all, and how much you enrich my life and make me happy. You are all so wonderful, and I am so proud of all of you.